So, good evening and welcome and assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to the Poplar Limehouse BAME Forum meeting. We have two items on the agenda. The first one is on zero-hour contracts, which has affected many BAME communities, both here in Towns and around the country. And the second item would be on apartheid and racism, and we have our special speaker, Bob Newland, already logged in. We shall hear from him very soon. We have a speaker on zero-hour contracts. The former council leader, Halaluddin Abbas, will speak on that, and also our MP will be joining us very soon. She just sent me a message. With further ado, I'd like to actually ask the chair of the BAME Forum, Mr. Sundar Mia, to welcome all the guests and formally start the meeting. Over to you, Faisal.
Okay, thank you. Good evening and assalamu alaikum. Can everyone hear me?
Wa alaikum salam. Yes.
Okay. First of all, again, I wanted to express my deepest gratitude for attending this Zoom meeting this evening. There are a couple of special agendas that during COVID-19 pandemic, where we are going through with unprecedented time, and particularly we cannot meet physically. Nevertheless, we still are in contact with different technology, but I would like to thank every and each of you to attend this meeting tonight. I believe that Ruhul already have says about the agenda, and surely before anything, I just wanted to request everyone that Hafiz Zakir Hussain has to go. He has another commitment. There is another meeting for him, and he need to leave early. So there was an agenda on any other business, which is love, not hate. So he requested me that if he would express his opinion about that agenda, he can leave early. So I believe that you don't mind. It may take about a minute or two, and that after we shall come to Bob Newland, and then so on. So I wanted to again thank everyone that you have joined that meeting, and hope that everything goes well. Lastly, I wanted to say I am also engaged somewhere tonight. So hopefully before I leave, I will ask everybody, and I will leave that with Ruhul to run this tonight meeting. So please, can I just request Hafiz Zakir Hussain just to discuss about the other agenda in what is your opinion? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Sundar Sasa, and welcome everybody, and assalamu alaikum. So what it is briefly is we have been speaking with Hope Not Hate, and Dr. Anna Patterson, our comrade, has kindly arranged a meeting for us. So we had a Zoom session with myself, Azad, Ruhul Amin, and Anna, and two representatives from Hope Not Hate. The purpose behind it is that a lot of us are feeling, BAME community and the Jewish community, so Jewish members, I beg your pardon, are feeling that the way the CLP treats them is not always becoming of a Labour Party, and they do feel, I mean, I personally feel, the way I'm treated is not always the same as, somebody else, with a different skin color would be treated. Others have felt the same as well, and therefore Anna decided, as the political education officer, to arrange a session with Hope Not Hate. And the purpose is for us to be able to just say what we're feeling, look at possible solutions. Hope Not Hate, they are an independent third party. So we are hoping that by having focus groups with them, so the plan would be the BAME community would, or the members would be arranging a focus group with Hope Not Hate. I'll be taking a lead on that. So really, I just wanted the BAME members to put their names forward, those who would want to be part of the focus group. Put your names forward to Ruhul Bhai, who's the secretary of the BAME forum. A maximum of 15, so it would be first come, first served basis. And yeah, the idea would be to hold a focus group with Hope Not Hate, who would be hosting it. So the Muslims, and if you want to call it the Black comrades, would have one session with Hope Not Hate. The Jewish comrades, they'll have a separate one as well, which would be probably mid-August to late August. So we already start off August now, so not too far away. And then there will be a join up of the Jewish members and the BAME members together, and a final focus group would then take place to look at possible action points and what the issues are, if both the Jewish members and the BAME members are feeling the same, and really what can be done about it. A lot of the times we talk about the problems within the COP, but we don't really give any solutions as to how some of these problems can be alleviated. So that's the purpose behind Hope Not Hate. So my request is if everyone could give their names, those who are interested to be part of the focus group, give your names to Ruhul Amin Bhai, and further details will follow within the next 2 weeks. So that's all I had to say. And I'll be leaving now, so if you would excuse my abrupt exit, please.
Thank you, Hafiz Zakir Hussain. I would ask Ruhul to follow up with the other agenda. So I believe that he will go with Bob Newland. Thank you, Ruhul. Carry on, please.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Assalamu alaikum, Zakir Shah.
Thank you, Zakir Bhai. Bob, so now I'm going to introduce our next speaker, who's going to speak on apartheid. Bob Newland is an anti-racist campaigner. He's campaigned in Africa. He's very well known in the East End. He's an ardent Labour Party supporter. So I'll be asking Bob if he's ready to actually sort of make his short speech. Bob, over to you. You have to unmute yourself, Bob. Can you?
Sorry, send it or say don't get feedback. My apologies. Thank you, Ruhul. Thank you, comrades. Forgive me, I prepared a contribution not knowing the balance or mix of the meeting, and it was obvious to me over the last few months in conversation with Labour Party members and others that when I talked about apartheid, people were not aware of what it was, the history of British imperialism and so on. So as a part of my contribution, I've done some historical stuff. My apologies if I'm saying things that you all know only too well. But with the explosion of the Black Lives Matter campaign and the opposition to the proposed annexation of Palestinian territories by Israel, the question of apartheid has returned to public discussion. As we re-examine that's Britain's imperialist past, it's important to recognise the role Britain played in creating the conditions for apartheid. I will begin with this and then follow on with the development of apartheid, the fight against it, and the specific contribution of the London recruits, and I will explain what they were as I go along. I'll finish on the end of apartheid and the need to overcome the legacy of apartheid before taking brief questions. The Cape Colony was established back in 1652 as a staging post for Dutch and British trade with India and the East Indies. It played a major role in the development of the slave trade. The Dutch farmers, Boers, moved north in the 1830s to escape the British colonial administration and to develop new agriculture. In the mid-1800s, with the discovery of gold and diamonds, Britain attempted to take over the whole of southern Africa. In between, the Boers getting fed up with the colonial administration that Britain had introduced in the Cape Colony and moving to find new farming land, which was what was their main driving force, had occupied significant parts of what we now know as South Africa. The attempt by Britain to take over Southern Africa led to two Boer Wars. These were in 1884 and 1899. During the Second Boer War, Britain created what were the first concentration camps, in which over 4,000 white women, 22,000 children, and 1,600 white men died. Black workers were corralled in separate camps. Their deaths exceeded 20,000. After defeating the Boers, Britain proceeded to develop and exploit the Union of South Africa. They introduced votes for whites only and a range of racial legislation, including the Native Land Act, which handed the vast majority of the land and mineral resources to the white minority. South Africa became independent in 1934, and in the 1948 general election, the Boer nationalists gained victory on a program for separate development, apartheid in their language, Afrikaans. They proceeded to extend racial legislation to cover every walk of life. This included pass laws which required non-whites to carry an ID card which specified where they could live and work. It was an offence to be found outside of those areas or not to carry your pass. They moved the majority of the black population into townships and into tribal homelands, providing a source of cheap labour for the multinational companies and farmers exploiting the gold, diamonds and agricultural wealth of the country. The non-white majority, blacks, Indians and coloureds, along with many progressive whites, opposed apartheid through mass civil disobedience campaigns, but were met with increasing repression. In 1955, at the Congress of the People, the ANC, the Communist Party and other progressive organisations presented the Freedom Charter, offering a blueprint for a future non-racial South Africa. Following this, 156 ANC leaders were charged with treason, but after a 5-year trial, all were acquitted. In 1960, a demonstration in Sharpeville against the pass laws was met by armed police who shot hundreds of demonstrators, many in the back as they fled. 69 were killed. Following this, the ANC, the Communist Party and African trade unions were banned. With no prospect of peaceful change, the ANC under the leadership of Nelson Mandela resorted to armed struggle, establishing its armed wing, Umkhonto we Sizwe, the Spear of the Nation, generally abbreviated to MK. In 1963, MK's headquarters on Lilies Leaf Farm outside of Johannesburg were raided and 10 of the leadership were arrested. They were subsequently sentenced to life imprisonment. With most of their leaders in prison or in exile and the underground structures of MK and the ANC all but destroyed, a plan was devised by Oliver Tambo in exile, along with other South Africans based in London. They enlisted white students and young workers in the UK to go clandestinely to South Africa to spread the ANC's message and keep its name alive while among the non-white population. Most of the recruits were young working class men and women. Many had never been abroad, flown or even stayed in a hotel. Because they were recruited in London, they later became known as the London recruits, although some came from Ireland, Greece, America, and elsewhere. One night, back in 1971, a comrade from the Young Communist League approached me and told me I'd been selected for a special task, to set off leaflet bombs in South Africa. Like all those who were asked, I didn't hesitate to agree. I was 21 years old and unemployed. We were told we could get captured, tortured, even killed, but we were young and enthusiastic and considered ourselves bulletproof. The ANC gave us training to avoid being followed. Because of the many TV spy stories, these are widely known now, but to us at the time, learning to stop and check looking at reflections in shop windows, to enter a shop and leave by the rear entrance, and many other tricks were very exciting. In 1971, I flew to Johannesburg along with my comrade Peter Smith. We had specially designed suitcases with false bottoms in which were contained thousands of leaflets printed on very thin paper and lists of addresses of ANC activists and supporters to whom we were to post copies of the leaflets. I also carried a Fortnum & Mason biscuit tin in which was hidden the explosives for the leaflet bombs. For those that don't know, Fortnum & Mason in Knightsbridge was one of the major stores that supplied food and clothing to suit the ex-British colonial people in South Africa and elsewhere across the colonies. Once in South Africa, we constructed the bombs using plastic buckets and other material we brought from a hardware store. We hid them in carrier bags. We placed them in bus and train stations where thousands of black workers returned home to the townships at the end of their working day in the cities. Simultaneously, 5 leaflet bombs were set off in 5 cities across South Africa over a number of years. When the explosives went off, thousands of leaflets flew 60 foot in the air and then fell into the crowds where they were eagerly snatched up before the security forces could intervene. I returned to South Africa a year later in 1972 with a Greek-Australian called Alex Mumbaris. We were a reception committee for a ship carrying ANC guerrillas from Somalia to land on the Durban coast. I travelled from Southampton to Cape Town on a cruise liner carrying equipment vital to the mission in 2 false bottoms tea chests. As the ANC had limited funds, I had to share a cabin, as it happened with the son of a wine-growing family from the Cape. He struck up a friendship on the cruise with a Rhodesian special branch officer who'd been based in London. And as a result, we ate together during the trip. Each evening at dinner, the policeman would say to me, "I'm sure I know you from somewhere." My response was always, "I guess that's possible, I come from London." I felt a denial could make him think all the harder about how he might have known me. He described how he loved antiques, and that every Saturday he would go to Camden Passage at the Angel Islington to buy antiques. He certainly did know me. What he hadn't worked out was that every Saturday I was at the Angel Tube selling the Morning Star. Throughout the trip, I avoided picking up a newspaper so that believing that if he saw me and a newspaper together, then he might work out where it was he'd seen me. I met up with Alex in Cape Town and we travelled to Durban where the ship was to land the fighters on remote beaches. This was to be the first mass infiltration back into the country of MK fighters who'd received military training outside of South Africa. The ship, the Aventura, was crewed by volunteer seamen from Liverpool. Unfortunately, it was beset by repeated engine failures, and after 8 weeks, the project had to be aborted. Alex went back later in the year along with his wife, Mary Jo, to infiltrate the guerrillas across the land border. Unfortunately, they'd been portrayed and were arrested as they entered the country. Alex was tortured and eventually sentenced to 12 years in prison. After serving 7 years, he escaped along with 2 other comrades from Pretoria Central Prison in one of the most daring prison escapes ever. And last year, there was a film came out with Daniel Radcliffe called Escape from Pretoria, which told reasonably well the story of that amazing escape. Other recruits were engaged in providing safe houses for MK in countries neighbouring South Africa. Some were involved in a safari operation carrying 40 tons of weapons into South Africa over an 8-year period. All of us were ordered not to talk about our activities. More than 30 years later, we were invited to the South African High Commission for an event to thank us for our contribution. That evening, one of the recruits, Ken Keeble, suggested we should all write a chapter of a book telling our stories. 32 of us did, and it was published with the title London Recruits, The Secret War Against Apartheid, recording the many adventures and misadventures he experienced in this extraordinary chapter in South Africa's history. That's the book. Some of us went back to South Africa, reversed it, of course, doesn't it? Some of us went back to South Africa in 2012 for the launch of the book, and were invited to former President Thabo Mbeki's 70th birthday party. In his speech, Thabo Mbeki dedicated the event to the London recruits, who he said had come to help them in their darkest hour. We just wept because we had no idea how important our contribution had been. A film is also being made about our activities and is expected to be released next year. The struggle against apartheid continued for many years. Armed struggle and the development of mass disobedience within South Africa combined with the worldwide anti-apartheid campaign and boycott movement. This brought about the isolation of the apartheid regime. In 1976, a black student campaign against having to learn in Afrikaans led to an uprising in Soweto. A violent response by the police killed 170 school children on the day, and many hundreds more over the following weeks. This was a major turning point, and over the next years, the townships became increasingly ungovernable. After military defeats in Namibia and Angola, with the help of the Cuban forces that had come to assist the ANC and the liberation movement in Angola, the apartheid regime was finally forced to the negotiating table. In 1990, Nelson Mandela was released from prison and the ANC and Communist Party were unbanned. In 1994, the first free and democratic elections resulted in a massive majority for the ANC and a transitional power sharing government was established. Apartheid was ended, but there is very much still to be done to overcome the terrible legacy of inequality and poverty which it left. I want to end by saying that it was an extraordinary privilege to have been given the opportunity to contribute in this way to the fight against apartheid. However, I would want to stress that the main burden of the struggles fell on the people of South Africa who sacrificed so much in ending apartheid. Okay, I'm happy to take questions, Ruhul, if there are any.
Yeah, thanks, Bob, for your beautiful speech. If anybody has any questions, they can ask Bob. Does anybody has any questions?
Ruhul.
Yes.
First of all, I just wanted to thank Bob Newland for sharing us his bad experience and giving us the knowledge of how these crooked racists have operated these particular missions throughout the world or in South Africa. Nevertheless, we appreciate, I believe that there are many BAME comrades have attended. If anyone wishes to ask any question to Bob, you please may raise your hand and we shall allow you to ask questions. Thank you.
Yes, I think Khalida wants to ask a question. Go ahead, Khalida. You have to unmute yourself.
That was so fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing that history. I'm just curious, what can we learn from you about what you said about being young and a bit risk neutral or risk easy, and how we can think about that with Black Lives Matter? We can think about that about apartheid in South Africa, in Palestine. We can think about how we possibly engage in more community activities so people feel that they have a stake. And what you were saying, Robert, was that because you had a London identity, you had some you had some bondage or connection, and you felt part of something. What do you think we should learn from what you experienced for such amazing change?
Okay. Oh gosh, that's a biggie, isn't it? Well, firstly, I think solidarity, international solidarity, is absolutely fundamental to overcoming racism and imperialism. Capital works in an international framework. It sees no borders. It exploits wherever it can, and it uses all its resources. And individually, and even in individual countries, we are weak compared to their tremendous power. So working together with others, recognizing their needs and working with them is fundamental. I grew up from the age of 15 involved in anti-imperialist campaigns, and with the comrades from all over the British Empire, many of whom were based in exile in London, and they shared with me their experience. I think it's their experience which is far more important than mine. My partner Anne always says to me, "Bob, you're white. You butt out of these people's lives. You know, they've had enough of what white men have done to them and their families and generations of their people." We argue about that, but it's certainly true to say that each of us in our turn, and you collectively, have the power together to make difference to your lives. Work together, gain strength together, overcome difficulty together, support those who are finding it difficult. Back in, was it as long ago as in the 80s, wasn't it? Brick Lane, when the National Front was there every Saturday, and young Bangladeshis were there. I guess maybe one or two of the people who are here tonight, opposing them and getting arrested, getting picked off by the police, who of course were racist and defending the National Front. And a number of us, because again we were white, organised and in a position to place ourselves between the police and the Bangladeshi youth, came down Saturday after Saturday after Saturday to try and turn it around. So it was the National Front who became the focus of the police actions and not the local community. And that community action was absolutely extraordinary. We were fortunate enough to be invited into cafes after the National Front had gone home, after a couple of hours of standing on a corner, totally isolated, with a cordon of us, a cordon of police, and a cordon of Bangladeshis, keeping them from doing anything and selling anything. But and shared with us, of course, your struggle and your history and the direct impact of imperialism on your lives and your peoples. So I think getting back then to youth and Black Lives Matters, we have an extraordinary opportunity at this time to mobilise in significant numbers against the impact of racism here and internationally. And in a sense, going back to where I started, one of the key things I would learn is learn history, know your enemy, find out what this is all about. The history of racism is the history of capitalism and imperialism. Divide workers by colour, divide them by sex, divide them by any way you can to maintain your power to exploit and your advantage. So, an understanding how British imperialism, in particular, one of the most clever and sophisticated of all of the imperialist powers, worked across the world to exploit and to maintain its position after the independence of most of their previous colonies. Learning that and understanding that is a powerful weapon to informing. And then finally on the question about Palestine, of course our particular contribution was unique to that time. And a funny story, as I went through the airport the first time to do the leaflet bombs in Johannesburg in 1971, my mate Pete said, "Oh, what we're going to do on this long flight, let's get a chess set." So we got a travel chess set, but it was a magnetic travel chess set. And that month, or in the last couple of months before we traveled, and we'd never been on a plane before anyway, they introduced the arches to check for weapons and things. And of course, this chess set, which was in my pocket, was magnetic. As I went through, this whole thing went bright red and people piled in from all corners to grab me. And then I said, "Oh, sorry, this," and then they just patted me down and that was fine. But you couldn't take the stuff through that we took through. You couldn't do the things that we did specifically. But there are, many calls. One of the successful parts of the campaign against apartheid was the boycott campaign, boycott of South African produce, Jaffa oranges in particular, Alspan oranges. But, boycotting Israeli produce, that from the occupied territories, that which is being stolen. And I accidentally used Jaffa in the South African context. But Jaffa oranges are coming in from all over the world. Although what people may not know is that Jaffa was not an Israeli product, it was a Palestinian product. It was the first seedless oranges and a very successful business until that land and those orange groves were stolen in the occupied territory. So do the boycott, work in solidarity, work together, give strength to each other.
Thank you, Bob, for your wonderful contribution. I believe that you have made yourself very clear. You have given us enough the experience you have gone through with. You have shared all the experiences, and you particularly have mentioned during late 60s when the skinheads used to come down to Brick Lane, and it was a hard time for us. At that time, I was one of the rebels who were firmly standing before these people in favor of my community. Nevertheless, now we would like to move to the next agenda, which is...
Can I just thank everybody for the invite? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bob. 0 hour contract. So we are discussing this 0 hour contract tonight meetings due to the fact that during this COVID-19 pandemic, what we have noticed that most of the BAME community have been affected by this 0 hour contract. A lack of says many of our BAME community people been working for care association, and the company they works for, the government allows them to apply for 80% salary while they are under lockdown situation. But most of our workers, they did not receive 80%. That's number one. And 0 hour contract, people, those who has been through with that, they only can elaborate that in a way that we can see in our borough that many of these cares association have employed our community people with 0 hour contract. So we got another special speaker tonight who wanted to speak on the 0 hour contract basis, who have served this borough for a number of times as a leader of Tower Hamlet, and he have devoted his life for this community. As far as my knowledge goes, the person who is Halal Abbas. So can I request Halal Abbas to speak on this 0 hour contract? Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, Sundar Bhai, and good evening to Bob. I didn't realize I was a speaker. I was simply signing in to join, but I will try to share my personal view. I haven't prepared anything, and I also don't want to lecture to the converted. The ethos behind 0 hour contract is basically a con to exploit workers. How low-skilled workers, low-paid workers are exploited are well documented. So therefore, I will not go into the academic argument. But it basically means those that are on 0 hour contracts have no job security, have no fixed income, and quite often people are living in a limbo of not knowing when they may be offered work, how much work they will be offered, how much their income would be, and therefore you can imagine and try to put yourself in that kind of situation. How are you going to plan your financial commitment, whether rent, mortgage, or domestic expenses that we all have to bear on a day-to-day basis. But rather than lecture on the philosophy of zero-hour contracts, and I think there are a number of documents have been how Sports Direct have exploited people, how you are not able to take breaks, how you are not able to take sick leave, how you are not able to actually enjoy carers leave, or many of the other privileges some of us take for advantage. But the COVID pandemic has affected people far more severely who are on low pay and low skill jobs. And mainly, I think, Mr. Chairman, you have highlighted include people like care workers. Large number of people from BAME community work in the hospitality sector, service sector, and retail sector, which has been the hardest hit by the pandemic. You've mentioned about the furlough scheme. At the moment, we know there are about 9 million people on the furlough scheme, which will come to an end in October. When it does, the London is likely to see roundabout over 200,000 redundancies. That's at a time when people are actually struggling to survive, make ends meet. There are people who are making every single effort to earn a living for their families. These are the sectors which readily employs people from our communities. And I think one of the things we have not actually seen any kind of positive response from the government. So one sector, for example, is the minicab industry. We know large number of minicab drivers in London are from Black and ethnic minority communities. If you are self-employed, you're not eligible for furlough scheme. I think to access universal credit is sometimes very challenging. To access housing benefit could equally be challenging. Although the furlough scheme offers limited protection, I am very worried and concerned what will happen in November, that we will see more people being pushed further into poverty. We've seen how food poverty affects working class communities in boroughs such as ours in Tower Hamlets and across other parts of London. So I think one of the things that, sometimes people may argue, zero-hour contracts has its advantages. It offers flexibility. You can choose when to work, when not to work. That has not been the experiences that we have seen, and the kind of evidence that we've heard from people who are on zero-hour contracts. If anything, they are exploited. If anything, employers are allowed to get away with their obligations towards pension, towards sick pay, holiday pay, and other pay anyone would expect to enjoy under a pay arrangement. So zero-hour contract, I think, affects people at the lower end of the ladder, and majority of people from Black and ethnic minority communities are in those sectors that has been hardest hit. One example is the catering sector, in the restaurant sector, where even with the government of our 50% discount, eat out to help out. I've just been to Brick Lane before joining this, and been in a restaurant, which normally would have been on an average serving at least 30 to 40 people per evening. I just saw a couple, 2 people who are eating. A restaurant that has at least, tonight when I asked the owner, there were 8 people working. 2 people are not going to pay their light and heating bills, let alone contribution. So I think one of the worries is that I think we will see impact on BAME community, on small businesses, people actually self-employed, and in my opinion, zero-hour contracts are a con to exploit low-skilled, low-paid workers, and it should be outlawed. Again, I'd be very happy to not happy to take some questions, but also would be very happy to hear from other people's experiences what they think, so that we can learn and hopefully campaign towards getting zero-hour contracts abolished. So I'll leave it to you, Chair, to open it up to questions or even comments or observations from other comrades. Thank you.
Thank you, Abbas, for your contribution. If anyone wishes to ask any questions, you may do that, or we go to next speaker. And I wanted to say that I'm very delighted to see our MP, Poplar and Limehouse MP, Afsana Begum. Welcome, Afsana, to this Zoom meeting. Before you, we shall ask one of the councillor to contribute a little on the zero-hour contract, and you would be the final speaker because you're going to take a bit longer time. So I hope that anyone wishes to ask any questions to Abbas.
Yes, Khalida, you need to
Khalida, yes, you can go ahead. Yeah, you have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I apologize. Oh, I was just thinking about the zero-hour contracts in terms of what can, as an ordinary person, other than writing to my MP, which I know probably agrees with the position that you have just articulated, what else could an ordinary person do to fight zero hours contract? And as the furlough scheme is coming to an end, and there are risks to people's health, and that's why the government is bribing people to go and eat out, in my view, before safety, surely we need to help either retrain people or move the furlough scheme onwards to a national position to assist people having an interim employment, because we can't expect people to live on nothing. We just can't expect them to do that. And by trying to just help everyone use you go back to the old way of living that isn't safe enough, we're trying to prop something up. There must be some way of rethinking future employment for the people who have to be out and about. You know, I'm very, very privileged. I can work from home. If I couldn't, I'd be in their shoes. So we must be able to say, if the furlough scheme is coming to an end, let's retrain and let's give them automatic right to universal credit and retraining. What do you think?
Thank you, Khalida. I think what we can do, I think quite often, if we're isolated, we feel powerless. As individuals, we cannot do much, but if we join forces, we can do a lot. Some of you may remember Gerald Ratner, the high street jeweler, many, many years ago. And he, at one of his key speech at a conference, he sort of said, well, if you can brand anything, and if you can fool people, you can run a successful business. When people heard that and boycotted, the whole chain of Gerald Ratner's jewelry went out of business. If we collectively stop boycotting, and boycotting was a weapon that was used in South Africa, boycotting Barclays Bank, who was one of the biggest investors in South Africa, made a big difference because it did hurt South African economy. It did actually hurt Barclays Bank. But if we start boycotting institution, organization, particularly retail shops such as Sports Direct, it will hit them where it will hurt. I think collective power can make a big difference. As individual, maybe not a great deal, but if we all decide to vote with our pocket, then I think it can make a difference. I agree that I think we need to think of employment. A lot of people have been saying, well, when are we going to get back to normality? I don't think we will get back to normality. Capitalism hasn't worked, but there has been a number of ideas floating around for a number of years, and there are a number of people who have thought far more in details than I would even think of venturing there, such as the minimum income. We are one of the wealthiest country in the world, yet we have people on our streets begging, not for luxury, begging for food, begging for shelter, begging for warmth. That, I think, is beyond belief. Yet our multinational companies are making billions of pounds on the back of people who actually work in sweatshops, working on 0-hour contracts. So I think collectively we can make a change. Paying workers a decent salary is not going to bankrupt any of those companies. If they're going to go bust, they're going to go bust. When the Labour Party, and I belong to one, and I have a number of views, but when the Labour Party promoted minimum wage, the CBI, some of the captains of the industry said, here is a nail on our coffin. Our company is going to go bust. We're not going to be able to pay it. I don't think any companies that pays people living minimum wage have gone bust. They may have gone bust for other reasons. If you look at the work of the Living Wage Foundation, if anything, if you pay people a decent salary, they become more loyal. They become more motivated. They remain with you. They interact with your customers better. They generate more profit for those companies. So I think we need to see beyond an immediate profit. I think you're right that we need to think the pandemic has brought it home to us that we cannot rely on capitalism. I think there's a view about when the lockdown should have been introduced, how late or how soon that would have made a difference. I think the government did that on it. They thought they were protecting the economy. Instead, they sacrificed lives of thousands of people. And now we all are paying for it, including some of those companies. So I think we can do a lot unitedly. I think we can do a lot by exposing some of those exploitative employers. And I think we can get our representative at the parliament to raise and keep hitting on the issue, the need for rethinking and need to pay people a decent salary.
Thank you. Thank you, Helal Abbas. Can everyone hear me?
Yes,
Can everyone hear me?
yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for your contribution. You have thoroughly explained how it works. I believe that many of us here, which is affecting our community, we should think twice and consider that. And possibly what I reckon that we collectively should bring up to the borough, we should launch a campaign where we believe that we are affected by this particular policy, which is 0-hour contract, whichever the way. And hopefully our MP, finally, she will speak out what she thinks about it. However, before that, I could see Councillor Purumia, and he is silently sitting down. Can I request him to say a few words, Councillor Purumia? Are you there?
Hello, Assalamualaikum. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I wasn't planning to speak, but what I'll do, I'll just go through just practical things we could do, especially on 0-hour contracts. First of all, I think what we're facing is an unprecedented crisis. I just want to give an example of my ward, my land ward, where I have 25,000 residents where at the moment 200 families are reliant on food aid. So every week we're having to do deliveries for food packages to families that are reliant on food aid because a lot of people have lost their jobs. And we're predicting that it's going to go up to 2,000. So that's the kind of prediction we've been given, and we're sort of like building up capacity to meet that. So that just gives you the scale of crisis that in just one small ward, we're going to have 2,000 families that are going to be reliant on free handouts for food because people have lost their jobs. So practical advice would be that people should join a union. Even if you're on a 0-hour contract, you should join a union. Now, I know a lot of the problem that we have is a lot of our unions are not geared towards people on 0-hour contract, precarious employment, especially people in the care sector. But I just want to give the unions that are focused on that. And one of the unions is the United Voices of the World Union, which I believe is based in Tower Hamlets in St. Matthias. And they particularly focus on 0-hour contract and people on low wages and care work. And they've won various pay increases for cleaners, people at the very low end. So one thing is join a union. The other thing is we just have to work collectively as well and support each other, because the current predictions that we have is that in September, the economy is basically going to go collapse. That's what a lot of the financial industry, etc., the bankers in Canary Wharf, that's what they're predicting, that we're going to face a collapse. There's going to be mass unemployment, and we just have to basically work together, support food banks, join unions, and support each other to get through it, because this government is not going to do anything for us. We're not their natural voters. That's a sad reality. They're not going to do anything for the poor or the working class communities or the BAME communities, because we don't vote for them. So we're not a priority for them. In fact, they would blame us for a lot of the problems. And you saw that with that MP, Craig Whitaker, the MP for West Yorkshire, that blamed COVID-19 on BAME and Muslim communities, and it had nothing to do with them. But this is a tactic that's been used throughout history, where when a government is faced with a problem of its own making, what they do, they blame it on a marginalized community. So it happened with the Jewish community at the turn of the century, with the Aliens Act. It happened with the minority communities. Brexit was blamed on East Europeans, etc. And you had a long history of governments blame race baiting, using immigration as a dog whistle to blame minority communities and criminalizing them. And we're seeing a rise of that. So we all need to come together and basically fight the oncoming crisis that's going to happen. That's my feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Puru. Does anyone wishes to ask anything to Councillor Puru?
Khaleda, do you want to go? Just in your hands.
Hello.
You go first.
Okay.
Do you want anyone who wishes to ask any question?
I'll ask a question. I just thought the gentleman was before me. Sorry. I thought Shima Halal was before me. Shall I just go?
My question. Sorry. Should we take Halal's question first? Is that right, Khaled?
Yes, please. Can you give me a chance? Just 1 minute.
Okay. Go ahead, Halal. Right.
Hello. Thank you for everyone. So I just add something regarding 0-hour contract. So I'm one of care worker also. I'm working care sector long time. So it's important job. We do hard work. We serve vulnerable people, older people, disabled people. So we serve by the people, by the community. So it's really shameful because of we do hard work because we don't have any contract. So we do working like 0-hour contract. So our demand is permanent fixed at least 24-hour contract. We was raise our boys, so council give us 12-hour contract. So 12 hours is not enough. So at least our demand is 24 hour. So I think our respected MP, Limoge Popular MP, also here. So Apsana. So so obviously, even this pandemic, we do hard work. Everyone know, we do hard work. We are frontline worker. We do hard work. We serve people even this pandemic. So really, really, our demand is at least 24-hour contract. Please, raise our boys and support everyone to us, because we are doing hard work. Thank you for everyone.
Can I come back on that? I think the first thing, Halal Bhai, we need to do is everybody needs to join a union. And I think one of the good things we have amongst the carers is there's a carers association.
Yeah,
but if everybody,
everyone, not everyone. So some of our colleagues, they have joined in Unison, GME. I am also a Unison member, so I am joined Unison, so trade union. So thank you for your advice. So I'm also senior vice president of Tower Care Association. So we have lots of colleagues. So they also we are doing shoulder to shoulder work, doing community work, hard work, and we are organized. So inshallah, so we was success. They give 12-hour contract, but now our demand is 24-hour at least.
Can I suggest something, Halal Bhai? You know, instead
yes,
of you as individuals joining different unions, it'd be good if the entire carers association took its members and joined a single union, and then you would have a branch that's representing with one voice, and then that's what it is. So whenever you're faced with a situation, first thing is everybody comes together, and then you have a single platform. I've had initial discussions with the United Voices Workers Union. I know Shukur Bhai spoke to me, and we've had initial, so I'm just waiting for someone to come back, and I've put the proposal to them that the entire carers association joins the union and has its own branch, and then you could basically mobilize and you have an entire union branch basically representing all these workers and putting your cases forward. So that's something I'll feed back to the carers association about the discussion with the unions. Also, I'm just going to raise an inquiry with another union as well. But I think instead of individually joining different unions, everybody needs to join one union. So you're speaking with one voice and you have one representative. But I'll come back on that one. Thank you. Khaleda, you had a question.
Just a quick question. It was just on the union. I hadn't heard of the union that you mentioned, the World Union, and it's local. So I wondered, should we all put it on our local CLP agenda? So, you know, the details and the contacts, so we can all share it with people that we know who are on 0 hours contracts.
So I've put it on the chat. It's a United Voices of the World Union. They actually specialize in people on 0 hour contracts and precarious employment. So traditionally, trade unions, they worked on, say, public sector or say car companies where you had really good terms and conditions. We're facing a situation now where more and more people are entering into employment contracts with very bad conditions, and you need a union that specializes in those kind of things. So if you look at United Voices of the World Union, they've actually took on cleaners and security guards, people on very low precarious employment, and won cases for them. So they specialize in that kind of field. So that's why I thought it'd be approaching it. But I've put the details on the chat. Yeah. But I'll send out an email to the secretary to send it out to the CLP. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Puru. I think. Hello.
Can I make a point? Right.
Yes, please, quickly.
I would endorse what Councillor Purumi is saying, but I think we're getting the mainstream unions off the hook. And I am a trade union member, been a member for GMB for many, many years. GMB, Unison, Communication Workers Union, others, they have failed to reach out to low-paid workers, people who work in the informal economy. The other one, Puru, is independent workers of Great Britain who also do similar work and complementary to the United Workers Union. So I think, yes, unions, independent unions, where we should actually join together, amplify our voices, but we mustn't also let the mainstream unions who have failed consistently to represent low-paid workers. And I think what Brother Halal was raising earlier, I think there is an issue about minimum income that I think we need to, the civil servants are in favor of hours being increased because more people come off the work-related benefits. But there is, at the moment, I cannot see why people are employed for less hours when we have, last time I looked at the statistics, there's something like over 50,000 vacancies in the care sector. Yet people are not offered the hours that they deserve, and hours that would actually give them the security and benefits that we all enjoy.
Thank you, Halal Abbas. I reckon that many of you had made a very good and valid points. I think some time ahead we shall get together in a sort of tea gathering somewhere, and we'll draw up that what step we need to take. Now let me go to our speaker, MP Afsana Begum, who has patiently heard every one of us for quite a long time. We really appreciate Afsana that, so we thought it would be a wise thing that you hear from all of our comrades. And then what I am going to ask you that please do share your thoughts and your advices that what particular step should we take regarding this 0-hour contract. You must have heard from many of us that how it's affecting whichever, and what can you do in Parliament about it? So can we ask our Poplar and Limehouse constituents MP Afsana Begum to deliver her speech. Thank you, Afsana.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum to everyone that's on the call, and it's great to see so many faces that I've not seen in a long time, but also to see newer members of the local party of Poplar and Limehouse as well. Also, thank you so much to the chair, Shudra Uncle, and Secretary Rul Amin, and the entire committee for inviting me to this important meeting discussing 0-hour contracts. I don't want to repeat too much of what's been said. I think some of the folks have really hit it on the nail in terms of where we stand now and how, the COVID-19 pandemic is really exposing the weaknesses of the economy as it currently stands, but also the world of work, and how the world of work is going to change considerably over the next few years. And 0-hour contracts were initially sort of trying to institutionalize flexibility of work, and that was a guise really to cover up exploitative practices and low wages as well, and poor working conditions, as has been mentioned. There have been various attempts to review 0-hour contracts and working practices. There was a Taylor review. There was even a private members bill that was proposed to try and undo it in 2014, and that failed as well. And of course, we know that the Labour Party proposed in its last manifesto in 2017 actually proposed to ban 0-hour contracts. And of course, we're not in government, so this becomes all the more difficult to challenge as a result. But the reason why I mention, the understanding the current situation as it is right now is because with COVID-19, we are walking into a recession. It's going to be a deep recession, and we are already seeing huge amounts of unemployment which is going to increase. So more and more people will lose their jobs, and those in already insecure work contracts will unfortunately be at risk of being the first ones to go and become unemployed. Now, we know in London we have the highest worklessness rate, but we know also that some sectors and some groups of people are really underrepresented in terms of highlighting the plight of those who are actually on 0-hour contracts. Now, I was looking at this just even earlier today, just to look at various pieces of research that's been done by the bigwigs and done by lots of corporate organizations that analyze our work economy. And so much of that is segregated, quite rightly so, in terms of looking at 0-hour contracts in terms of demographics, for example. But so much less of that is concentrated in terms of, for example, analysing it in terms of ethnicity. So when it is analysed in terms of ethnicity, it's sort of looked at in terms of white British and then everybody else that falls outside of that. And we know that, from our experiences, even in Poplar and Limehouse, that even within, BAME communities, certain BAME communities are represented in some sectors more than others. And whilst the world of work is changing and going to change, looking at the fluctuations in terms of demand and supply as the economy progresses and as the pandemic progresses, as we have localized and national lockdowns as time goes on, we will end up seeing work and contracts reflect the jobs that are needed at particular times. And again, that puts lots more people who previously weren't at risk, even those, as Hilal Bhai has mentioned, are on 12-hour contracts, that took a lot of campaigning to achieve. That's going to be, at risk as well. And I think one of the things that I really think about when it comes to 0-hour contracts is actually, it's not really seen in terms of the fact that it's actually often a stepping stone for work itself. So it's not really looked at in that way. It is looked at in terms of flexibility. It is looked at in terms of the employer's benefit and the employer's organization or sector. But it's very, it's not really looked at in terms of how much, it is often a stepping stone for somebody who is perhaps gaining employment for the first time. It's not looked at a lot in terms of migration and looking at migrant workers. And I think in that sense, that's why we've got all these issues around, the lack of furlough being able to be offered in these sectors, and the lack of statutory sick pay that's available for those on 0-hour contracts, because the pay is so low and because the practices of the hours itself being so low in number, meaning that that's not available to those workers. Now, turning to the local level, and I recognise that some of our sectors where our BME communities here in Poplar and Limehouse are represented well in, for example, the care sector, for example, the cabbing. The cabbing sector and those industries, those are not types of work that will necessarily become automated in the future. So as the government is progressing, there is continuous strategy to look at how work is going to become more technologically adapted, how it's going to become more automated, what work is going to become automatic to do that. It won't require human beings to actually deliver. Care is not one of them. We will still need carers. We will still have an aging population. So we will still need carers. So why is this area of work and this area of work not really being valued, and why aren't carers being valued in the way that they should? And I think that's really an area to focus on, I think, for us as a local area, as a local constituency. But of course, in terms of retail and the catering sector as well, I mean, these are types of jobs that are not necessarily going to become automated, even in 10 years' time, and will still require human contact, as it were. So I'm keen to support campaigns at a local level in this regard. I do think unionizing is really important. I do agree that some of the really large, quite wealthy unions at national level, I think, fail to reach out to some communities that are really highly represented in these sectors. Maybe again, it's to do with language barriers, not really communicating in the language of work, if you like, of our communities. But I think those gaps need to be reduced, and I'm in conversation with some unions to try and make those links and to try and make sure that some sectors and some places of work are unionized that aren't already unionized, and exploring which unions would really like to reach out and should be reaching out to some sectors that they haven't already done. And I think that's going to be quite key going forward in terms of workers' rights, as we start to see more and more redundancies, more and more unemployment. I think really organising at a local level is going to be so important to support one another. I think there is so much going on right now in terms of filling in the gaps for the government, which shouldn't be happening, but is still happening through the third sector, through the charity sector. And some of that is going to need to continue. That mutual support of our communities for one another at a local level is going to be really, really crucial. I'm willing to take away from this meeting to write to, for example, the local council about, I think those that are employed, I think, as carers through the local council to find out a bit more about what support and what guarantees and what assurances the council can give to local care workers, because I do think that the entire situation around adult care, one, not only needs to be reviewed, but I think needs to really be reviewed in terms of the employment perspective. And secondly, I'm always keen and looking at opportunities to raise the issue of how COVID-19, for example, has impacted upon the BAME community. And I've raised quite a lot so far in terms of the number of excess deaths that we've experienced in the BAME communities, particularly in the Bangladeshi community, which obviously we have suffered the highest number of excess deaths. And so much of that relates to the world of work. So I'm going to keep banging that drum in terms of the fact that, you know, we've experienced this because we work in sectors that require so much human contact, that require that are very risk averse in terms of COVID-19. So we are placing ourselves more at risk. As the pandemic enters new phases, whether that reduces or stays with us for another year or two, it's always going to be, you know, BME people that are going to be, you know, putting themselves at risk of dying and catching the virus. So I'm very conscious of the fact that, you know, however long this goes on for, and however long COVID-19 stays with us, we are always going to be at the bottom of that pile in terms of attention, and that is how things stand in terms of the government. But I am actively seeking opportunities to raise that much higher on the agenda for the government, and I will look at opportunities to apply for backbench debates, Westminster Hall debates, to try and raise that plight even further. So those are the two things that offer. But as I say, I'm also in conversation with unions as well to try and make sure that those links are happening in sectors that aren't already represented. But I also recognise that I think some of our sectors, the catering industry, for example, and others, in terms of exploitative practices, need to get a bit more support from the government as well. So I'll leave it there. I'm happy to take questions as well from those that are on the call.
Okay, thank you, Afsana, for your valuable speech. I believe that you have addressed many things which out of my imagination, and I wanted to thank you from bottom of my heart. As you said, many things which you have indicate that we should collectively put up with the local council and see how the resources are, what things they can do for 0-hour contract, so on. And particularly, there are many sectors in your constituents as well as elsewhere in the borough. I reckon that we shall focus in Poplar and Limehouse particularly, just to ensure that that our community is safe and sound, most of all. I believe that that you are very happy to take questions. Now we already have got one of our hardcore activists, Shedwell, Muhammad Abdul Shukur, who is the communication officer in Poplar and Limehouse CLP, and he's our Shedwell Residence Forum chair. He wanted to ask a question. Mr. Abdul Shakur, please, could you ask your question?
Hello, good evening, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you to BME Chair Junaid Ahmad Sundar and BME Secretary Ruhul Amin. And thanks to all guests, MPs, councillor, and brothers. So I'd like to say about the 0-hour contract. The 0-hour contract, I think it's inhumanity contract. It's unfair contract. This contract affected the BME worker, and most of the affected are care worker. We have 4,000 above care worker in Tower Hamlets. So majority were care worker, 95 care worker are doing the job, 0-hour contract. Long time we have to fight our right, the 0-hour contract, abolish the 0-hour contract. So council doesn't hear our voice. 2 years ago, council established the 12-hour contract. So 12-hour contract is not enough for us. Our demand is 24-hour, minimum 24-hour permanent contract. The care worker doing the hard job. I am a advisor of Tower and the Carer Association. I also care worker. So we are doing hard job, but we do not get enough money. 0-hour contract worker, like slavery contract, the care agency take advantage. So my humble request to our community activists, social activists, you have to support us, and we are care worker, we are united, and we have to fight our right. Councillor Purubai, I ask you, you have to raise our voice in council full meeting, and council will abolish our 0-hour contract and establish the 24 hours minimum contract. And I request our Popular Limehouse CLP constituency of MP Afsana Begum, you have to raise our voice, you have to raise our 0-hour contract in parliament. Inshallah, if you raise our voice in parliament, then 0-hour contract will be abolished and established our minimum 24-hour permanent contract. Thank you, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Afsana, would you like to say anything regarding Abdul Shakur?
So thank you so much, and thank you for all the work that you're doing with the Tower Hamlets Carers Association, and establishing such a brilliant organization and connecting so many of the care workers with one another across the constituency, but across the borough as well. So you know, that has such a valuable impact and input in terms of the world of care work, and to be able to establish yourselves in the way that you have, I think is a strength, and it's a reflection of your commitment to the local area. I do agree with you that I think you know, the hours that are currently, you know, a part of the permanent contract feature of workers locally probably does not necessarily meet the demand of the care that is needed for local people at a local level. So I'm aware that at a local level, for example, much adult care is delivered by private care providers. For example, HC1, which has come up, for example, this is one of the care homes locally in the constituency where we've had a high number of deaths, and they are through private companies that a lot of the care is being delivered in terms of the local constituency. And I do think that perhaps the way in which adult care is delivered at a local level needs to be reviewed in terms of how much of that is in-house and how much of that is privately contracted and outsourced, and whether, you know, that really is valuing and involving local workers, and how much of the local economy now, which is a lot of the discussion that's happening, I believe, at the local council in terms of the recovery phase of that pandemic, how much of that is going to involve local people in terms of recovering the local economy. So I'm happy to, as I say, go back and make those representations to the local council, specifically in terms of care workers, their contracts, and how much assurance can be given to protect that area of work at a local level, and assurance that this won't be impacted as a result of any of the shortfalls that are being experienced through the local budget. So I'll definitely go away and do that. And in terms of Parliament, as I was saying before, I will look at opportunities actively to raise the issue of 0 hours contracts. And the reason why I want to do that as well is because if you look at so much of the evidence that is even being provided by, unions or trade union congress and other bodies, the typical view of what somebody on a 0 hour contract is on is somebody who's much younger, is perhaps female, is perhaps in the administrative sector. And that's not necessarily the case. It's a very different picture if you look at Poplar and Limehouse. And I think, that almost like the hidden elements of work and workers that are represented on their own 0 hour contracts isn't well represented at a national level. So I will look at opportunities to actually raise what the 0 hours contract worker in Poplar and Limehouse looks like in Parliament. So I will actively seek opportunities to perhaps secure a backbench debate or a Westminster Hall debate on this very issue, and look at opportunities for maybe yourself as the Tower Hamlets Care Association to provide witness evidence. So I'll actively seek those opportunities as well for ways in which you can come and speak to Parliament and actually, outline what you're actually experiencing as a care worker in your field of work. So those are the things that I'll definitely commit to and take away. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Afsana, for your contribution. We really appreciate. I just wanted to share my thoughts with you guys. The situation we are going through. Very starting point at this meeting tonight, when Hafiz Zakir Hussain were talking about love, not hate. I just wanted to highlight you guys that you could imagine tonight when we invited our executive mayor just to zoom into that meeting. For tonight's meeting, he have sent his apologies. You could imagine that where we stand. Before that meeting, the BAME Forum has called a previous meeting where Mr. John Biggs were unable to log in. And as you can imagine that most of our comrades, such as Councillor, we really appreciate that Councillor Purumia is everywhere, right in the corner, sitting quietly, whatever he does, but still he's standing for the community. We really appreciate all of you guys' hard work and your feelings about your own community. However, you could imagine we talking about love, not hate. You could judge yourself that where we stand, where we got 42 councillors in the borough, everybody could leave some contribution into that very important meeting about 0 hour contract, and everybody knows that it means something to do with the local council. However, we are pretty much busy with taking out the dead man statue, which is slave trader. Slave trader, I repeat, we are very much busy and we feel proud about it, nevertheless. But as one of our comrades tonight, Mr. Abdul Shukur have mentioned in his question that it's kind of a slavery job. So if you elaborate that in your own way, that 0 hour contract is a modified English. It's a sophisticated English. It's a cosmetic lip service people are putting originally, if you consider that, it is an slavery job, nothing less than that. However, we collectively, may I urge everyone that we collectively should put up with the local council, and the government at this moment is helping. Earlier, Khaleda have mentioned that government is braving us to go out and eat out. Nevertheless, if you bring all the people who has made a little comment and put together, you will get your answer. But most of all, I would say that we need to work collectively to get out from this particular crisis. And the Bara extremely is ignoring, I would say, ignoring BAME community. And I think Khaleda have mentioned earlier that in her question that I think we can bring a motion in CLP just to discuss that thoroughly. And above all, we invite Mr. Biggs just to pop into that meeting tonight so that we can hear from the horse's mouth that what are the policies exactly and what turn should we take to save all these people. Councillor Puru have said that in his word, 7 days they are distributing food to people, those who are affected with COVID-19 pandemic. Now, it seems that when you're going for distributing food, it's another subject altogether, but they're not considering that people are truly affected indoors. Some people cannot go around to collect food from food bank, and we need to consider that. So can I just remind our MP Afsana Begum, as you have earlier said that you are happy to work with grassroots and your local. I believe that you would focus these needy people and trying to meet group after group and take from them, and we shall collectively put up either with the council, and you can suggest us if there are any signing petition needed, we can take it up to the parliament about these particular issues. I reckon that I have made myself pretty clear. Lastly, I wanted to say that many of the comrades have joined, and I could not have time to say hello to them, but please accept my apologies that people, those names not been mentioned in that meeting through me or my colleague or comrade Ruhul Amin. Our sincere apologies. It is your forum, it is our forum, and we should firmly stand together for bringing up or fighting against these hypocrites throughout the country. Thank you. Anyone wishes to say anything, please?
I think Puruvai wants to say something. Puruvai.
Thank you. Just a proposal. Just a proposal that I'd like to put forward. Can the BME Forum work with our MP Apsana in designing a campaign, local and national, on this issue? If we all agree, then can the BME Forum work closely with her office and with other local stakeholders to put a campaign together on this issue of gathering information and raising it on a local level or national level? If we, that's my proposal, and if everybody agrees, can we accept that as a proposal? But I'm happy for anyone to object to that.
I'm fine with that. I don't know about the chair, but would be more than happy to work with Afsana to actually campaign on this on a local and national level. How about the chair?
I am very delighted to say that I am always happy to work with not only Afsana, people related with my community, and just to safeguard the interest of my community. I'm always there, and I'm very happy to work with Afsana. Thank you.
Bob, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry to intrude on the rest of the meeting, but there were some thoughts came across as the exchange was taking place that might feed into that conversation, that campaign that you're talking about. Firstly, I think there's a hidden part of the austerity agenda where local authorities were given responsibility for care, but not given a full budget to represent that. So there was already a hidden cut in that process. When you talked about 2,000 local carers, I think there's more, because I'm sure Tower Hamlets community provides many carers to other boroughs as well. You know, it's quite obvious from speaking to carers along the way that there are people from Tower Hamlets who are working throughout London in providing care. Thirdly, and very quickly, local authorities don't supply all the care directly because it goes through private care homes, it goes through private care contracts, but it is public money. And it is a duty of the local authority to provide that. So when we're talking to our council about, we need to be talking to them also about how they work together with other councils, because our position is no way unique. We do have exceptional problems because of the demographics of our community and the particular impact on the BAME community of COVID. But ongoing, the impact of such a campaign is only going to be effective if it is across all the councils. Forgive me for intruding. Thank you.
If I could kindly come back on some of the points. So I think, firstly, I mean, I'm more than happy to work alongside the BME Forum and work with you to develop this campaign at local and national level. I think there are certainly local components to this as well as national, and I'm more than happy to work with you on this campaign. And I think establishing, you know, where all of our workers are and what kind of work they're doing, not just in the constituency but outside of this constituency, is really important, as you say, Bob. And apologies to have missed your earlier contribution to the meeting. But I think that's really important because I think, as you say, I think some elements of that have changed through austerity and manifested itself differently in that initial period after 2010, and looks slightly differently now in 2020. But nonetheless, the terms and conditions, if you like, of what zero-hour contracts actually mean in the law has not changed very much at all. And it's important that we don't let this slip away and continue to become businesses as usual in terms of the world of work. So I think it's important to keep up that challenge and especially now in the fact that we are in this pandemic, which is, you know, posing a new set of challenges in terms of unemployment, in terms of the risk of exploitative work practices increasing in the next few years as well.
Thank you, Afsana. Yes, so does anybody have any other questions? Right, okay. Khalida, yes, go ahead.
I was just wondering, with the approach, would there be mileage in having a campaign to stay local, to boycott the chains, only go to restaurants where it's small businesses, look out for your street, you know, how do we take care of people in our community in your own street, because that's a bit more doable than taking on things that, you know, might be too much. But just staying local and supporting small business and the union and local unions and all of that. Is there any mileage in that? Because I do think that the chains, there's a lot of emphasis on the bigger business, and I think the voluntary sector and the public sector need to come together. And I just don't know if there's any legislation we could ask for to say that the private sector is systemically against class politics and we have no truck with them being part of the solution.
Thanks, Khalida, and it's so good to see you. So I think there definitely should be a local focus. I think it's not in my constituency, obviously, but Brick Lane is a symbol in so many, it's an icon locally, and I think we should be supporting some of those local businesses, particularly where some of these restaurants are owned by local people who also invest locally in the community through cultural and heritage projects as well. So they're giving back, as it were. So in one sense, if we lose out on local businesses and local businesses start closing down, we lose an aspect of ourselves as a local community as well. And I think there should be a bit of a focus. And as you say, there's actually been lots of private companies that obviously have benefited and made so much profit during this pandemic, and also not paying taxes and so forth. And we are talking about some of those big chains, we are talking about some of those big companies, but we are also talking about some of those big retail and companies, and also restaurant chains as well. So I think it is really important to try and support and help recover some of our local businesses and some of our restaurants that are not chain restaurants, that are not franchises, that are that were anyway just getting by. And we need to support them. We need to also support our market traders. We need to support our all of our local initiatives and sustain them because they meet the needs of our local community, but they also give back as well, despite not having huge amounts of profit and huge margins that they cross. So I think that's key, and I think you're probably right in terms of priorities and in terms of what we can proportionately do with our efforts whilst we are all experiencing the pandemic, whilst we're all kind of navigating through that, is to probably try and concentrate in on a few priorities and projects at a local level. And that does seem like maybe the eat out offer that's been put on by the government is something that maybe we can concentrate in on locally. Maybe we can circulate as a forum, can circulate details of some of the businesses at a local level that have opened up and need customers really.
Thank you, Afsana. So we have actually come to the end of the meeting. I want to thank special thanks to Robert Newland, Afsana Begum, Halal Abbas, Councillor Purnia, and everyone else. So I ask the chair to close the meeting now.
Thank you, everyone, for giving your important time, and we really appreciate that you have joined that meeting. And many of you, I haven't spoken, but again, I wanted to express our sincere apologies that we couldn't exchange our dialogues. Nevertheless, please accept our sincere apologies, and we shall meet again. And thank you to everyone for joining this meeting, and hope that we shall work together and bring a best outcome for this community. And at this moment, I would declare that the meeting is concluded. Thank you. Have a good evening.